Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is sort of the best practices. And before I really get into this too much, I wanted to kind of let you know how I arrived here. I've been using this tool for a little bit more than 7 years, and I've been using it very successfully with a number of clients and companies I've worked with. So what you see today here is really a collection of my trial and error, my experiences, the things that I've tried and have worked on utilizing InfoGist for a number of different environments. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I can summarize basically 7 years of experience in just five bullet points. We're going to go ahead and cover some of these, obviously, but just to give you the big picture, and those of you who've seen me present and seen me speak before know that I like to kind of paint a 10,000-foot view first and then drill down and go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. So my 10,000-foot view is basically this. Best way to utilize a tool like a power browser like InfoGist Platinum Recruiter is to cast a very wide net. Spread your net out as far as you can and capture as much information as you can. To do that, the number one most important thing, and this applies to everything that you do that's sourcing related, not just InfoGist Platinum Recruiter, but every tool that you use on search engines or even on job boards directly, it doesn't matter. It's all about the key terms that you use. Bad key terms get you bad results. So learning how to apply the right key terms is absolutely critical, absolutely important. But really, at the bottom of that is being proactive. A lot of recruiters basically just sit and wait for the resumes to come in the window, come in the door, come through the website, or basically just people applying through job postings. I call that post and pray. My very good friend Eric Jakewith introduced me to that term. I'm not sure if he invented that or if he heard it somewhere else, but the whole post and pray activity of just putting a job out there and expecting people to apply and come through applying for that job just doesn't work in today's talent economy. So what we're going to talk about today is how to be proactive, automate, and cast a wide net. And then after we have received all the information or collected all the information that we can, we're going to talk a little bit about how to communicate without directly soliciting so we don't get ourselves in trouble. So that's the last piece. So here's the agenda, and we've kind of already mentioned some of these things. So first thing we're going to talk about is how to cast that wide net. Then we're going to go into building accurate searches. We're going to talk a little bit about how to enter the key terms and how to conduct what's called a detailed search using Platinum Recruiter. Then we'll go into analyzing results. So we've got all this data, we've got all these resumes and profiles. What do we do with them? What can we learn from that? Then we'll talk about sending out a message to communicate with these people. Those of you that are on the call may not already know that there's actually contact management built into Platinum Recruiter, and one of the things that we do very effectively to utilize that is to contact people directly through Platinum Recruiter. Then we'll talk about basically automating this whole search process. So going back to the first couple of steps, we're going to create a system that does the work for us, does the heavy lifting for us. And then once we have set that in motion, we'll learn a little bit about exporting resumes into our different applications, CRMs, ATSs, email addresses, and other things like that. And then finally, we will culminate with some additional features, just kind of highlighting a couple of features that you may not know, since if you've already used InfoGist, you may not know that you have and could take advantage of. And for those of you that have not considered this application, these might be some features that kind of make the difference on whether or not this is a useful tool for you. Okay, so let's talk about how to cast a wide net. The number one strategy that I utilize is I subscribe to every possible job board. So what I mean by that is there's a list of job boards, and some of those are free, some of them require registration, some of them require that you pay or subscribe, like, for example, the big ones you might know are Monster and Career Builder and so on. But overall, subscribing to every available database is one of the best ways to cast a really wide net. The next thing I do is I use very simple keyword searches. I don't use complex nested searches with lots of booleans and ands and ors and pluses and minus and all that stuff. I keep it simple and specific. And then after I get the information that I need, after I download all the resumes, that's when I start refining and start learning from what I've done. So that's what I've done in the past. If you have a specific need for a detailed search, there's a feature called Detailed Search that allows you to get some additional search parameters from some of the major job boards. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then when you're casting this wide net, some of you might already be familiar with this. you might realize that some job boards are going to set limits for you. They're going to tell you how many resumes you can view per day or per year or for the entire license of your subscription. We can actually control how many resumes we download through InfoGist so that we don't exceed those limits and we operate within the parameters that are required. One of those things that we use is a tool called Smart Retrieve, which I'm going to talk about in just a second here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where Platinum Recruiter searches. So when I talk about casting a wide net, this is that big database, this big database in the sky, let's say. Okay, these are all the job boards that are out there that InfoGist has collected, and some of them that might not be, you might be using, that might not be on InfoGist, can very easily be added. So if you ever have a job board that you want to add, simply email the folks at InfoGist and they'll be able to add that job board for you, whether it requires registration or not. Altogether, there are two major categories. There's places that you can go to for free and places you can go to that you have to subscribe to or you have to pay. Among the free resources, there's 233 resume banks. Some require registration and some don't. Then there's a number of communities and university sites and search engines. Among the paid sources, these are the ones that you already know. Monster, Career Builder, Dice, and Hot Jobs are included. But also sites like LinkedIn, for example, can be searched using InfoGist. In addition to that, you can also search your own ATS. This is one of the critical features that I think a lot of people don't realize that make the difference between using this tool and basically following a manual process, and that is the ability to look inside of your own applicant tracking system and treat it as a source, just like a job board, just like a search engine, and be able to bring all of those results into one folder when you're conducting a search. When you create that folder, or you bring everything into one folder, you can then also use Platinum Recruiter to search your PC for resumes in that folder. And then finally, extending that analogy or that point one step forward, not only can you search your own PC, but you can also search your entire LAN. So if you create a network drive where everybody shares their resumes, or if you have a team drive or something like that, you can actually search through that through your LAN as well. At the very bottom here, there's a link. If you follow that link on the presentation, it'll take you to a list of all of the job boards or resume banks that InfoGist is currently set up to sort or to search. And then, of course, in addition to that, you've got your ATS, your PC, and your LAN. Not all ATSs are currently built into InfoGist, obviously. So if you have an ATS that isn't built in, you can very simply create a request and have that ATS added as one of the sources for InfoGist. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to build an accurate search. That's the next slide here. And I've mentioned this before a couple of times, and I hate to repeat myself, but this is very, very important. It's all about the key terms. When you use key terms to search on job boards, the best thing to do when you're casting a wide net and getting as much information as you can is to search only for the absolute bare minimum must-have requirements. Those are the requirements that if they don't appear in a resume, that hiring manager or that client or that company should not even look at that resume at all. So we're talking about the bare must-have absolute requirements. The best advice I can give you is to get specific, not complicated. When you get specific, you're looking exactly for what you want to find, as opposed to saying, well, I don't want A, B, C, or D, and I also don't want E, F, G, but I want something like this. Be specific and say exactly what it is that you want, and InfoGist will bring that back to you. So let me go ahead and show you a couple of things on entering key terms, and then I'm going to bring up the application. So one more slide here, and then I'm going to bring up the application for you. Now, I realize some people might be asking themselves, what is an ATS or what is a CRM? An ATS is an applicant tracking system, and a CRM, by the way, is a customer relationship management tool or a client relationship management or sometimes contact relationship management. Basically, ATSs and CRMs store information about the people that we're talking to, whether they're applicants or candidates or simply leads or contacts. They're databases where we track whether we've communicated with them and when and all that stuff. So let me talk a little bit about how to enter key terms. The first thing you need to realize with InfoGist is that when you're using InfoGist to search, it doesn't just do Boolean searching. It also has relevancy scoring. So the tool itself has the ability to go out and grab a bunch of resumes that have similar terms to the terms that you're looking for. It also has the ability to use full Booleans. So you can do or statements and statements, and also and not statements. The three Booleans are basically the and, the or, and the not, or the plus sign, the minus sign, and in search engines it would be the vertical pipe located above your enter key, which is basically the same as the or symbol, and then the minus sign is the and not, which excludes a term. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about what I mean by fuzzy matching. Here on this slide, you see the second bullet point talks about fuzzy matching. What fuzzy matching does is it gives you the ability to find terms that are similar. So it's kind of like expanding your search to include similar or rooted words. In the first example here, the word manager in all lowercase, we'll find on resumes words like management or managerial. However, if you capitalize the word manager with the first initial capitalized, so capital M, manager, we'll also find, instead of finding the general management and managerial, we'll focus in a little bit more and we'll find things like managed or managers, which is a little bit more specific, but still sort of fuzzy. It's a closer match, but still expands the search a little bit. However, if you capitalize, all caps, the word manager, then you will only find manager exactly spelled that way and nothing else. The next thing I want to talk about is when you're using natural phrases, and let me tell you what a natural phrase is. A natural phrase is basically a set of words that, when used together, make a phrase that is normally used to describe something. Like in this example, I have software engineer. When you're looking for software engineer, it's very, very important that you enclose the word software engineer in quotes. So you open quotes, software, space, engineer, and close quotes. Other words that you'd want to do this with are account manager, application developer, things like that. SAP consultant, for example, because if you search for the words individually, then if you only use software and not engineer, or you only look for engineer and not software, you're going to get much broader results and they won't be very accurate. There's a question, Matt is telling me that there's a question from the audience from someone that says that they have used InfoGist and Talent Hook, but they want to know why I prefer InfoGist instead of Talent Hook. That's a very good question. And what I can tell you is that, in my opinion, InfoGist has a lot more robust features. It gives me a little bit more control over the searches that I do. It also has a larger database of search engines and sources that it seeks. So when I talk about casting a wide net, I personally feel like I can cast a wider net and have more control over sort of the shape of that net, if you will, when I'm using a tool like InfoGist. But also, I find that I have the ability to very quickly add job boards and search engines and make suggestions with a tool like InfoGist, because over time they have been very responsive to my requests, which is one of the reasons that I'm a very big fan. And they've been able to make those changes very quickly for me so that my searches have improved dramatically over time. I really haven't heard that kind of feedback from some of the other tools that are out there. And of course, Matt is also asking me now, since I brought this up, people are going to want to know about SourcePoint. Again, same basic principles. I feel like I can cast a much wider net. But in addition, I also have the ability to be able to bring the resumes down to my computer, whereas with SourcePoint, they stay on a third-party server. And here, I can bring them into my computer or my LAN, and then I can share across a team and search within that and do all kinds of other things, like, for example, search my own ATS. Hopefully that answers the question. I don't want to get too much into comparing the three tools, because we really are talking about a strategy here, not necessarily one particular tool. So technically, you can take whatever you want out of the strategy. But if that isn't a satisfactory answer, please let me know, and I'll go into it a little bit later on in the session. So using your quotations for natural phrases, using your proper capitalization to expand or shrink your search, and then using your Booleans, you should be able to control very accurately what you do when you're casting a wide net. The last bullet point that you see in here is the use of parentheses. We're going to actually talk a little bit about that when I build a search, because there's a difference between building a search using the any button or using the all button. So I'm going to show you that in just a second. But before I do, think of the parentheses as a way to enclose a Boolean statement. So that first bullet point there, it says plus open parentheses Unix space Solaris close parentheses, means that you're telling InfoGist that you want to find either one or both of those words on a resume, either Unix or Solaris or both Unix and Solaris. By enclosing it in the parentheses and putting a plus next to it, you're requiring that one of those two keywords does appear. With the fuzzy search, the ability to do fuzzy search, you would think that something like, for example, SQL would also bring back MySQL and Transact SQL. The case with those is that the fuzzy search works to the right. So if something were after SQL, like SQL something something, for example, SQL 7.0 or something like that, it would work, but because the fuzzy search only works to the right, in order for you to include MySQL and Transact SQL, you actually have to spell them out. So in a case like that, you would use the Boolean to require that one of those three, either SQL, MySQL, or Transact SQL, are present on that page. And you make all three of those, one of the three of those, required by putting the plus sign next to it. Let me go ahead and show you how I build a search. So this is the Platinum Recruiter tool that you see here. And because of the amount of time that it would take for me to download 2,200 resumes, I created a folder here and downloaded a bunch of resumes as a test for today. So you can see the 2,200 resumes that we obtained from all the different sources. What I did to build that search is I went into Resume and chose Pay and Free Resume Banks, which basically is all of the above. And you can see that there are 716 different places where InfoGist will go to do my search, but out of those, only 399 are currently activated for my account. That means that there are a number of job boards, for example, paid job boards that I simply don't have subscriptions to, and there are also a number of places that weren't relevant for this search that I unchecked so that I can make my search a little bit more efficient. Like, for example, FuneralNet or Careers in Food or places like that aren't going to really have a lot of C++ software engineers. So here's my example of a search. And when I told you before about casting a wide net and using very specific terms, this is a very good example of what I would do. From this search, and you can see it resulted in 2,231 resumes, I would then refine it to narrow down what I want. I realize that most of your requirements aren't as simple as find me somebody who has either C++ or Java and has the job title software engineer. If you are working on this kind of requirement, they probably also say, oh, and they also have to have, CSS or ASP or SQL or something else. I realize that, but remember that the strategy here is to cast a really wide net. So what I did is I simply said any, and the default, by the way, when you start this up is all. So when you first start InfoGist up, it's always going to be set to all of these terms. What all of these terms does is it basically treats anything that you put in here as an and statement, very much like a search engine would. For example, if you went to Google and put in C++ Java software engineer, that is C++ and Java and software engineer. That's exactly what you would be doing if you left this button checked. What I do, for example, and this is how I start casting my wide net, is I say any. That means that this now becomes an or statement. But I can require something be absolutely present by putting the plus sign next to it. So I'd say plus, and then anything in the parentheses is a requirement, but only one of those is a requirement. So it could be one of the two or both, C++ or Java or C++ and Java. The way this works, by the way, I'll show you this slide right here. Whoops. If you look at the overlap maps down here, when you choose any, this only applies to when you choose the feature any, not when you choose the feature all. But when you choose the feature any, if you want to include both C++ and Java in your search, that means a resume has to have both. Then you would simply put a plus sign next to both of them. So it would be plus C++ and also plus Java, like in this statement right here. If you wanted to find people that have C++ on their resume but don't have Java on their resume, then you would want to use this term, and that would eliminate anybody that has C++ but also the word Java. And then the third one would be if you wanted to include anybody that had either or, this would include any resume that has one or the other, and therefore this would be the biggest group. So I'll go back to my search example here. and close that little X. There we go. And then, of course, finally, I also require that the word software engineer be present. What this does, though, is remember that fuzzy search, because I did not capitalize engineer, will also find engineering and engineered. So it finds different variations of the word. I could actually expand that even more by saying software engineer, all in lowercase, and that would include different variations, even more variations of the word engineer. But if I wanted to be absolutely specific and find only the word software engineer, then I would make it all caps, software engineer. And to illustrate what I mean by that, I'm going to take this search and I'm going to refine within the results that I currently have. So in other words, out of these 2,231 resumes that you see here, which were found using that search string as you saw just a second ago, I'm going to refine that and see how many of these have the word software engineer exactly, and how many of them the word appears in different variations, just to give you an idea as to how you would expand your search if you were to use the sort of fuzzy search capabilities of InfoGist. So I'm going to let this refine, and it does take a second, so please bear with me. What you see here are the same 2,200 and some odd resumes, but now they have been scored or ranked in order by which ones of those have exact matches with software engineer. Well, Shally, I don't really want 2,000 resumes. You might be thinking, that's a lot of resumes. And yes, it is. 2,000 is a lot of resumes, especially if you only really need one to make a hire, right? But what I'm trying to show you here is a long-term strategy for casting a wide net. If you do this over time, you'll get fewer and fewer results each time, because what I do is I set it up so that as the searches are running, they only bring back results from the last 24 hours. So this particular search that you saw here was going back 30 days. So any resume that's at least 30 days or newer, or less than 30 days old, I should say, would come back on that search. The next time I run this, I'm only going to run it so that only the resumes that are 1 day old or better, in other words, maybe anywhere from 1 day to 5 minutes, are going to come back. Thus, the next time I do this, I will not get 2,000 results. I'm probably only going to get 20. That's just a guess, but I'm thinking it's a lot less than 2,000. So if I take you all the way down to the bottom of the results set here, you'll see that there are a few people that came in here that did not have the word software engineer exactly. The rest of them, pretty much almost all but two, had the word software engineer spelled exactly like that. So what we would do here is we would actually continue to refine this and dig a little bit deeper. If you wanted to bring people in who had ASP.NET, you would simply click on Refine Results and then take the same result set here and just do ASP.NET, for example, and then click Refine, and now it should run through those results and bring back everybody that has ASP.NET. The next slide I want to talk about is the detailed search. Now, a vast majority of you on the poll said that you have very specific geographic requirements. What I really like about detailed search is it has the ability to be able to drill into just a particular zip code, in fact, even several miles within a radius within a zip code. So if you gave it a zip code, say, for example, in northern Boston, you would be able to specify, I only want results that are within, say, 20 miles of that particular zip code. But you can also specify an industry, like, for example, information technology, an education level, like bachelor's degree, an experience level, which would be, say, for example, 2 to 5 years of experience, and a couple of other criteria. Why this is important is because this gives you a higher degree of precision on some of the fee-based sites like Monster, Career Builder, Hot Jobs, Dice, those kinds of job boards. And this is one of the key differentiators between InfoGist and many other tools out there, is that this matches the way Monster and Career Builder and those other search engines search. If you go into Monster or Career Builder, you do have the ability to choose an industry, an experience level, and so on. So being able to do that same thing with a robot across all these different search engines is a particular advantage. On that ASP.NET search that we did, looks like just a little bit over a quarter of the results had ASP.NET, and you can see now how it's re-ranked them. So those that have scored highly, like in the 100 or 90s or even 80s range, have ASP.NET several times throughout their resume, several times close together, and so on. In addition, all of these people have either C++ or Java and the word software engineer, because we are simply refining a search that we did before. So this would be our subset that we would work off of to recruit. Let me show you what I was talking about with detailed search. There are currently 55 detailed search engines entered, and you can see I don't have passwords for a lot of them. But if you were to do the same search here, C++ or Java and software engineer, you could specify a zip code, like my zip code here in Atlanta, for example, and say 20 miles radius, and choose an industry like information technology, and specify an education level, let's say a bachelor's degree, and 2 to 5 years of experience. And this is a much more specific, much more accurate search that would bring you back very detailed level results. I'm going to go ahead and exit this because I don't want to take your time now conducting the search, but it would basically go into one of the 4 job boards that I actually do have passwords for. It would log me in, conduct this search with these requirements, and bring back the results fairly quickly because it's only doing 4 job boards as opposed to before where we would do over 300 job boards. Once you get the data back, there's a number of things that you can do with it. So I'm going to take a look at the analysis that we have here for some of these. And I before doing this session today, I clicked on a couple that I viewed and contacted a few, etc. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I did that. But basically, what you can do primarily with the result list is you can sort it by score, or you can sort it by location. Not everybody has a location, but you can sort it by location. You can also sort by the contact's email address, and in some cases, some of the job boards support the first name, last name field, or they have XML that supports that, so we were able to pick that up as well. And then you can attribute the source of that resume to a particular job board or search engine for purposes of tracking, and just simply to attribute a hire to a particular source. So what that means is, take a look at the data that we've got here. We've got 2,231 results. If I click on the score, you see a little asterisk next to the word score. That means that now when I'm doing this search, I'm ranking them by the amount of times that ASP.NET appears, how exact the match it is, how close it is to the top, and a number of other criteria that the InfoGist algorithm put together. But I basically can take a look at the top results first and kind of work my way down the list. When I start calling, one of the things I like to do is prioritize my candidates so that I'm calling what I think would be the the potentially best suited candidates first. I don't know which ones are going to be the best suited candidates, but I have a good idea, and this helps me organize my calling list so I can just start calling down this list. The other thing you can sort by is location. In the event that a state does not appear, it'll just simply come back as blank. Some job boards and some search engines just simply don't support that. If you're getting resumes off of a search engine, for example, it may not always have a city, state, and zip, and therefore InfoGist would not be able to extract it. But for about half of the results that we have here, it looks like just a little bit less than half, they do have a state. And keep in mind, I did a very broad search, cast a very wide net, everything from Google searches to Craigslist resumes to you name it. And you can see that the state and zip code are listed here. So I could focus my search on, say, only resumes in Arizona here, and then I would be able to go down that list if that was where my requisition was located. So I would start calling Arizona first, then I might call California, then I might call Texas, and kind of work my way out geographically. So that's a great support for the kind of searches that I'm doing. And the other thing I can sort by here is the source. So let's say I wanted to focus only on candidates that were found by my ATS. Now, right now, it's actually saying that this is demo because I'm actually I found these resumes on my demo folder in my hard drive. If I had just done this search, you would see whether or not this was a monster resume or a Google search resume. But right now, in order to see that, you have to click on one. And once you click on one, let me show you where you can find that down here. You see down here where it says source. That tells me that this individual came from an Alta Vista search. And this is the actual address of this resume out on the web. In fact, it's a tripod, members.tripod.com /starks/stanresw.htm. That is the actual location for this resume out on the web. It also tells me when I found it, and it tells me some other information that might be in the header if I export this as well. Now you'll notice that there's a lot of contact information in here. For example, if I sort by contact, what this does is it alphabetically sorts by email address, and if they have an email address. Now, some of these might not. If I go closer to the bottom, I see some that don't have any email address, but they might have a name, for example. In this case, this resume came from Security Focus, and they support the first name, last name field. The email address is in the resume, but it was not exported because it doesn't look like an email address. So I'd have to actually, quote unquote, interpret this as dan@sunflower.com and type that up. But I can sort by that if I wanted to. Now, why this is important is because if I right-click on a contact, I can open that contact's information and do Control-I. And this is a little bit of that customer management or CRM type of functionality that I mentioned earlier. Here, you can see all the information that InfoGist was able to extract. You can even edit this. So now that I know it's actually das@sunflower, I can't type very well, .com, I have now been able to edit this record to reflect that. You can also see that I have first name and last name and sometimes address, and then down here I have a record of everything that's happened with that particular candidate or that candidate resume. So let's take a look at some of the ones that I've contacted. I'm going to sort by contacted here, and let me see. I'm going to load my search again. It should be able to show me which ones I've contacted. I guess I haven't contacted. I thought I contacted 3 or 4 of these people. I guess not. Let me show you which ones I exported. So there's a few here that I exported. And if I click Control-I, or just right-click and press Control-I, this will pull up that candidate's record, and it'll say, it was found on this date, it was saved on this date, and it was saved to this location, and then it was exported to this location. In this case, I exported it to my email address. From there, I can then send it into an ATS, and etc. It's still loading, as you can see. It's almost towards the end here. 20,000 or 2,000. It was 2,223, I think it was 2,231. There we go. Okay, now let's see if. No, it still doesn't remember the ones that I contacted. Maybe I didn't contact them. I might have had some problems with that. Okay, but it does show the ones that I exported and also the ones that I sent out. So in this particular case here, if I hit Control-I, it'll show you that I found it, saved it, exported it, and also sent it to somebody. Sending means that I forwarded this resume to an individual, and you'll notice that the status icon has also changed. That is something that you can manually change, and there's different statuses like hot, not available, and ignore. That means if you find a candidate that is absolutely not a fit for anything that you're working on, you can ignore that candidate, and later on when you do searches, instead of finding that same candidate again, it'll not show it to you. It might find it, but it won't show it to you, and it'll be ignored. NA means this person's completely not a fit at all, or just not available at that time. And then, of course, hot would be someone that you're currently working with, and I marked this one hot because I sent it to somebody. So that's how that works. So let me take you back to the presentation again here. And I want to show you a couple of other things you can do. If you see the last major bullet point here is to refine your results. You can hide certain types of results. So I'll take you back to InfoGist and show you what I mean. If you wanted to not see any results or any profiles that were previously ignored, you can check that off under the hide results when in the options, and you can say, don't show me anybody that I've previously ignored. And that way, if it's someone you've kind of dismissed in the past or don't want to keep seeing over and over again, and you guys know what I'm talking about, there's a lot of resumes out there with just spam keywords, and they come up on every search. You can actually set those to ignore so you don't get them anymore. They stay on your hard drive wherever you saved them unless you deleted them, but the next time you do a search, they won't